and we'll start this party. All right, everybody, welcome. It's our third Tuesday of every month, 12 straight months of education from Promo Standards. Try to keep this fairly consistent. Some real quick housekeeping. Stay tuned in our Slack general channel. You saw yesterday, there's a lot of things on the way. We announced a in-person event for those people who are going to be at ASI Chicago. So the details are in our Slack general channel Tuesday night. For members, it's a great time to network. We have about 20 unique companies already registered for this event. So if you or other technologists at your company are going to be in Chicago, send them the details. We hope to, in the next few days, to be launching virtual hackathon details. There's a lot that's going to be pretty cool on that front. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, last year we had a 55-person cross-industry hackathon that played out over the course of a week. It was pretty successful. It had some awesome projects that were presented. And ultimately, our team, the adapters, brought home the trophy and the money. So we hope to get that out probably in the next 4 or 5 days, those details, and then that's going to run for about a week in September. So stay tuned there. Other housekeeping, it'll probably come up at the end. So today we're joined by none other than Dave Shultz, Vice President of Supplier Relations, maybe at commonsku.
Close enough.
So for those of you who don't know, Dave heads up our Service Provider Committee. It's our newest committee at Promo Standards, and Dave will probably touch on what they're doing, some exciting advancements. There's a lot happening in that world. I think the last year and a half, some of our largest consumer growth, both on suppliers and distributors, have come from on the back of the service provider community. They're an important part to Promo Standards to help scale the reaches of our integration capabilities, what we're about. So I'm going to shut up here and I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and Dave's going to run with it for the next little bit. But like I said, if you have questions, hammer it in the Q&A, hammer it in the chat, and then we'll see what Dave's got to offer. So, all right, Dave, all you.
Cool.
Let's go.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As John mentioned, last year, I think it was toward the end of the year last year, he and Eric called me and said, hey, would you be interested in heading up a service provider committee for Promo Standards? Because we don't currently have one. Service providers are an increasingly important part of the whole integration picture out there in the industry. And so I did that, went out on a hunt and found some folks. We're going to talk a little bit about that and who they are and what we're doing. And then just kind of touch on some of the things that we've got on our radar for the rest of the year. But just to back it up, for those of you who may not be familiar with the organizational structure of Promo Standards at large, here's kind of a general outline of how Promo Standards is structured at the moment. And you can see the new service provider committee there toward the bottom. There's a number of different committees, and underneath the committees, there's a number of different work groups at the moment that are working on all kinds of cool stuff. And we felt like the service provider community at large just needed a bit more focused representation. And that's kind of where this work group or this committee came out of. As far as the executive committee, the board in general, you can see those folks here. Catherine, who I work with, is also our liaison to the board, so to speak, as well. And then you've got some of our board members that also kind of work with the committees. Eric works with the strategic roadmap committee, for example, and you can see the other folks there. And then for the committees underneath, these are all the folks that head up those various committees. So I was happy to add my face to this lovely picture of people here. So to talk about our committee for a moment, the folks that are on the committee at the moment, you can see them here. We've got Bri over at Zoom, Chris at Distributor Central, Kevin at ASI, Dino at Extendtech, Jason at Antera, and Kyle over at Facilis and Commercio. Sanjeev didn't get me a picture in time, so I get to choose what picture I use for him. Sorry, Sanjeev. Next time I'll have your picture ready. And the whole intent of this committee was to really bring together some service providers in the industry that have a vested interest in helping scale the use of Promo Standards and the adoption of promo standards. And really, you can kind of see what our purpose is here. This is in our committee charter here. The committee is responsible for all matters related to enhancing the experience of the promo standards service provider members, including onboarding and contributions to standards and best practices. And will foster a safe place. It's a little strange wording, but you get what I mean. Safe place to collaborate and to find common ground that will help advance promo standards initiatives towards reducing transactional friction in the promotional products and adjacent industries, going after other industries. I like it. And it was, in thinking about how promo standards came about originally, like if you look way back at the introduction of promo standards as a standard, the initial thought was this direct integration between distributors and suppliers, which you do see a lot today, of course. You have a number of distributors out there that have created the integrations on their end, and then suppliers that are hosting the endpoints that these distributors are tapping into. And what you see in this scenario, obviously, is each distributor is integrated with each supplier and vice versa. And this works really well for those suppliers and distributors that are large enough to create these services, and for the distributors that have the technical wherewithal on their end to integrate with the services that the suppliers are hosting. But where you start to run into issues is you start to look at how that scales across the industry at large. Like if we look at the distributor community, for example, based on the most recent numbers I saw, there's about 1,000 distributors that have managed to directly integrate with one or more supplier promo standard services. But if you look at numbers from PPAI and ASI, there's 30,000 or so, some 20 to 40,000, whatever those crazy numbers are, of distributors out there. So those distributors represent about 3% of the number, just the mass volume of distributors out there, even though they may account for a much larger portion of the volume being driven. You can see that from that perspective, that promo standards without the help of the service providers doesn't necessarily impact the distributors at large out there. And even on the supplier side, who tend to have larger, more sophisticated IT teams, there's about 430 suppliers that they're currently hosting one or more promo standard services. Clearly, like all the top 40, everybody like that is represented here. But again, if you start to look at numbers of suppliers as a whole industry, it's about 3,500. So from just a pure quantity standpoint, it's just over 10% adoption right there. Again, those 433 suppliers represent the vast majority of volume. So you're still hitting the majority of the industry with the suppliers and the distributors that are currently integrated. So when you bring service providers into this mix, the service provider community is there essentially to provide that connectivity, whether it be hosting, integration services, promo standards-based applications that can really drill down into the rest of the distributors out there, and even the suppliers that aren't represented by the ones that currently have promo standard services in place. And in this scenario, you can see that the distributors either are using a service provider to host their back end, or they're tied into a service provider that then provides the connectivity to the various suppliers out there. And this is kind of the space where the service providers in the industry sit currently. And you can see even on the supplier side here, I have a couple of supplier factories represented that don't have a promo standards logo next to them. And that's because service providers also provide hosting services, not just connectivity. So, you've got folks like, Extendtech, Essent, Distributor Central, what have you out there that are actually hosting endpoints on behalf of a supplier that doesn't have the expertise to host it themselves. So there's a number of different services that the service providers that offer out there, with the intent being that instead of being 3% and 12% coverage of the industry, that we get closer and closer to 100% over time, where every distributor and every supplier in the industry has the ability to tap into the efficiencies that come from integrating with a standard such as promo standards. In terms of the impact, if we just look at an example, I'm going to take a supplier or let's say a service provider that's processing 1 million orders a year through their platform. And you start to think about, the number of calls and emails that every order incurs in this industry. And I've seen numbers all over the place, but it's somewhere between 4 and 8 emails or calls per order. Everything from do you have it in stock? What's my order status? When's it going to ship? What's the tracking number? Has it shipped yet? Has it shipped yet? Has it shipped yet? So those kind of calls are the things that these type of services can reduce, and things that the service providers are very heavily invested in. So you start to look at this and look at the number of emails and calls that can be reduced. I pulled some rough average cost of a customer service call. For some suppliers out there, this will be much higher. For some, it may be lower. And you start to look at that. I mean, just for a service provider that's doing 1 million orders a year through their platform, you're looking at an impact between $10 and $45 million a year in reduced costs associated with answering all those inventory phone calls and order status phone calls. And that not only is it just a cost savings, but it gives those distributors the ability to work more efficiently, process more orders, spend less time sitting in the office checking order status, making phone calls, and more time out there selling the products that our suppliers are manufacturing. Of course, it also is a big piece of satisfaction and retention as you start to see more distributors saying, I want to work with suppliers who have these capabilities. How do I do this? How do I find them? And then, of course, from the supplier standpoint, what can those customer service reps be doing? Instead of answering inventory and order status calls, maybe they're answering more strategic calls like, I've got a project going on in California. What are some products you can print and have to me in 3 days? Things like that can help drive sales as well. So that's just to kind of paint the picture of where the service providers fit in this industry, and why we brought a handful of folks together to form a committee and start to talk about some of the things that are bubbling up as concerns or challenges in the service provider committee, or service provider landscape, so to speak. So what we did after finding those fine folks that you saw earlier was to kind of, use the first couple of meetings to really kind of feel out what are the challenges that people are running into. What are our customers asking for? Where are things that we're seeing where, there might be a solution that we can help shepherd along. And so these are kind of some of the long-term goals that we put together. Obviously, just ensuring that the service provider community out there has a place where their suggestions and contributions are elevated for discussion and consideration. We have a board, we have multiple committees under PromoStandards, but we now have a committee that is focused on the needs of the service provider committee. So, for those folks out there that are PromoStandards members and you have concerns or you have things that you'd like to see us working on, we're here to listen to those and figure out a way that we can help push them forward. We'll be doing a lot of collaboration as well. We're going to talk a bit more about a service provider directory in a minute. But that was one of the things when we basically listed, our list was pretty long initially, actually, a couple dozen things. We tried to figure out which of these things were most important to the service providers that were on the committee that we felt would have the biggest impact or be the lowest hanging fruit that we could address. And creating a directory of service providers in the industry that are offering PromoStandards services seemed to be something that bubbled to the top. I know in my old days in this industry, and I've been around long time with Distributor Central for many years and then commonsku for the last several, I get calls all the time from distributors and suppliers that want to do this, but they have no idea how to get started. And in the old day, really the only resource I had was to give them John's phone number, which he didn't really like, but that occasionally got them to the right person, depending on who they are and what they needed. And so developing a service provider directory that we can kind of maintain on an ongoing basis, to have a resource on the PromoStandards website to send people who are looking for, whether they're looking for hosting services, consulting services, application development services, or connectivity integration services. We wanted to have a place where we would list people in the community that could provide these services. And then, of course, we're always looking for ideas from the membership and from the committee members as to what we should be thinking about. And so the short-term goals, obviously, we came up with was to create this directory just to get started. Some of you may have seen the survey that went out recently in the email from the PromoStandards committee. And so we spent some time basically kind of vetting those, figuring out what type of services these folks provided, which services they were integrated with. And I'm going to show you that in a second. We've also been talking about a product validation tool, and I'll touch on this a bit more in a minute. These are some of the things that kind of bubbled to the top of our discussion in terms of things that we wanted to focus on this year and bite off some of that low hanging fruit. One of the other things was kind of looking at service level performance out there in terms of, there are suppliers out there whose services seem to be very slow, and how can we work with the suppliers to kind of figure out some of these things based on how often we're hitting these services. But one of the low-hanging fruit that we talked about that we wanted to tackle initially was a directory. So as of about 10 o'clock last night, there is a service provider directory live on the Promo Standards website. And I will call this an MVP because it truly is a minimum viable product that we wanted to get out there as a start to get some initial data out there, and then work with our fine folks that manage the website to get it integrated in a more elaborate fashion. So what it is currently, if you look at this, you can see that it's an embedded Google Sheet, essentially is what it is. It's super fancy. I know this is kind of ironic for us techie folks, but this was a quick way to get this up and running here. It's based on the data that the folks in the service provider community submitted to us. And basically what we're trying to do is identify people based on the type of services they provide. So you can see there's a couple different categories here, a few different categories that we included in that survey, whether they are providing integration services, hosting services, consulting services, or Promo Standards compatible applications. Because that'll dictate, if you're somebody new in the industry, or you're a distributor that's looking for these type of services, what is it you're looking for? If you're a distributor, you're not going to be hosting Promo Standard services, but you may need help in connecting to them. You may need help in developing a backend application that is fully compliant with Promo Standards. So there's categories in here to show you what these folks do in terms of the type of services they offer, description about who they are, what they do. There's a column in here that tells you which of the services they currently support. And of course, some contact information in there as well, who to reach out to if you need help. And that's really it. It's as simple as that to get started. If you scroll through here, you'll see a number of different companies already listed that talks about the various services they provide. Each of these are linked, of course, so you can drill into these companies, get a bit more information. Oh, looks like that link's bad. Missing some HTTP information there. Sorry, as I said, minimum viable product. We're getting there. So this is kind of what it's all about. Like, we've not had this in the past. It's just been kind of word of mouth. There is a directory, a member directory, if you're logged into the Promo Standards website currently, but it is more of a person-to-person directory. You can search for people. You can't search for services that they provide as a service provider. So ultimately, this page will be a bit more elegant, a bit more embedded. You'll be able to filter and search by the services they offer, which Promo Standard services they are currently integrated with, and things like that. If you are not in this directory currently and you are a service provider in this industry, there's a link here where you can fill out a form. And this goes for you folks that I already have listed in there as well. If you need to update your information, just fill out this survey and we'll get it taken care of. This is a member benefit. So we are only listing companies here that are members of Promo Standards. Obviously, the lowest membership level in Promo Standards is very inexpensive, comparatively speaking. So if you're not a member, there's a link to the membership page. Go check it out and see, why you should become a member. And then we will get you listed as a service provider as well. Ultimately, when this gets a bit more elaborate and embedded into the site, this will tie into, getting indexed on Google and all of these things. So when people are searching for Promo Standard services, this is the directory that's going to start appearing, delineating what these various companies do. I'm going to pause there for a second and see if there's questions coming in here.
Dave, you have one here about email addresses and the contact list. So it's Josh.
Yep, we could do that. Yeah, I had a few people ask to put them on there, and a few others that didn't want theirs on there. So we'll figure that out.
That's from Josh, who doesn't want to get inundated with getting hammered with questions. Yeah, there's another one, Dave.
I've gotten 26 emails this week offering me the attendee list for Chicago last week. Does anybody get those?
I love getting the attendee list for trade shows that are 9 months in the future. It's great. So you have a bunch of questions. Does a service provider that hosts endpoints have to be a member of Promo Standards? Do you want to take this one, or I can?
Go ahead.
So here's the beauty of Promo Standards, right? You don't have to be a member to do Promo Standards. Now, so that's one thing. Now, we would encourage you to, if you are that engage to host endpoints for PromoStandards, I would very much encourage you to be a member, because then you can join the service provider committee and then provide meaningful feedback to the organization. But to be listed as in our member directory or the service provider directory, yeah, we would just actually be a member. Like being a member, the bottom level is $500. As a service provider, hopefully you're seeing more than $500 a year of value out of that service. Our biggest thing is, driving the organization, our marketing, our tech support, our committee benefits, and our committee infrastructure. That's really what all that goes towards. So hopefully we got that one. Josh does not want to get spammed. That's a good one.
Got it.
So, and Bradley gets spammed by people trying to sell lists at the company where he generates the list. So. It's great. I think maybe the next hackathon for PromoStandards after this year, the theme should be how do we create bots and tools to fight back against the list sellers. So it's all right. So we'll just use AI to spam the list sellers and see if we can take up all their time where they find it's not a profitable venture anymore.
My favorite is when I kept getting them during COVID when there were no shows. That was funny.
All right.
Okay, so that is the service provider directory. Check it out. It's under the resources tab. Those of you who have logged into the site know also that under the resources tab, once you do log in, is the full-blown member directory, the links to the documentation, the lists of who's hosting which endpoints, all that kind of fun stuff as well. But we didn't want to put the service provider directory behind the login just because, these are going to be folks trying to find services out there on the internet. And so that this page is a public page on the website. Okay, so back to where we were. What's next? Essentially, like some of the other things that we're talking about once we get this done. And by the way, that directory is going to be a work in progress, obviously, to keep the information updated and up to date and getting new folks listed. So that will be an ongoing project. One of the other things that bubbled to the top for us was product data validation. Anybody who's worked on the service provider side of things or even the distributor side of things and had to ingest product data from suppliers knows that this is one of the more challenging aspects of PromoStandards. The inventory, order status, ship notification services, those things are plug and play and they run all day and they're great. When it gets to product data and even configuring and submitting electronic POs through the services, that's where everybody starts to run into some problems. And I know every supplier's product data out there is the best and completely error-free, but occasionally you come across products that are, they're either missing an imprint location or they're missing colors or they're missing decoration techniques, what have you. And it's not always evident until one of your customers goes to create a PO and realizes that there are no imprint colors to choose from, let's say, just as a basic example. I know for us at commonsku, this happens all the time. And when we run into those issues, we call the supplier and tell them what product it was and what was missing, and they go fix it, and then it's fine the next time. But what if we had a way where everybody could do this in a bit more structured approach? So Chris and his team over at Distributor Central, as part of their internal processes, they built a validation service through which they run all product data that comes in and out of Distributor Central. And it checks everything tied to the standard as far as the standard is concerned. Obviously, it's not validating, the efficacy of a specific color, but it is validating that a product has parts and the parts have imprint look, whatever, all of those various things that are part of the product, the pricing config, the media, etc. They have developed a tool that they can kind of proactively figure this out as the product data comes in. And they have very generously offered to donate this set of code to PromoStandards so it can become a service that everybody in the community has access to use. And so kind of the first step in this, after them offering to donate this, is to kind of figure out how folks are going to use it. There's a couple different ways it could be used. It could be used in real time where you're running product data through it every time you make a call to a supplier and pull back product data. It can be something you use only when you're pulling in, routine product data or when you first set up a supplier on your system. So these are some of the things we need to figure out first. So you're probably already tired of my surveys, but you're going to get another one soon. And so when we have that conversation and talk a little bit about how it's going to be used and the various flavors of this that could be developed, those are going to dictate specifically how Chris's team can kind of package this up and hand it over and ultimately host it on a PromoStandards-based AWS account with Amazon. So those are the conversations we're having currently. That survey is going to go out soon. It's going to ask you some things on, whether this is something you would use, how would you use it, whether it's in real time or just when you're setting up new product data. Obviously, this could be used by service providers and distributors. It could even be used by suppliers to test their own data. You'd be surprised how many suppliers call me and say they don't currently have a way to visualize their own promo standards data in a format that makes it clear that it's either, good or bad. So, as a service provider, a lot of times we're sending a screenshot back saying, this is what your product data looks like. You can see it's missing these 4 things and nobody can order it at the moment. So having a tool out there that everybody could tap into and use to do this, I think would be a valuable thing for the community. Promo standards validator on steroids. Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, my comment was, so PromoStandards has a validator, but it's a structured validator. It's a schema validation tool, and it hasn't dipped into the product data tool, which is great. I mean, so
yeah,
2 thumbs up from this guy for this.
So I'm excited. Chris and his team they're ready to go as soon as we kind of pin down some of these questions about how it will be used. And then, we'll figure out how we're going to host it, do some budgeting to see what the impact would be in terms of usage and costs incurred by the Promo Standards organization. And we'll get it out there and let people start using it. So I know we will use it ourselves at CommonSku as well. So I think there'll be a lot of other people that'll use this. So that's kind of one of the next, I wouldn't necessarily call that low hanging fruit, but it's something I think that could have a big impact on the community at large. And then, of course, I already mentioned, we will continue to refine the service provider directory. We want to work with the MMEC committee too to help, kind of do some joint education in terms of, people looking for promo standard services. How does that tap into what we as the service provider committee are doing, and having the directory available and the validator and all that kind of stuff, and start working on a plan to deploy the validation service as well. And then, of course, we're always looking for new ideas. I know I occasionally get emails from folks that want to be on the committee. We've got, about 8 people on the committee actively at the moment, and everybody's kind of got their roles at the moment. So we probably won't add to the committee itself this year. However, we probably will be spooling up work groups to work on things like this validation tool. So if you're interested in doing that, be sure to reach out. And then as we have people, drop off the committee at the end of the year, possibly, if they're like me and they're on 6 committees or boards at the moment, we occasionally will lose people, so we'll look to add to the committee and that way as well. So let us know if it's something you might be interested in. And I know John already mentioned this, but I threw it in here so he wouldn't get mad at me. The open bar, Promo Standards meetup in Chicago on Tuesday. I hope to see a few of you there. I'll be there Tuesday and Wednesday. And that's kind of what I've got for you today. Short and sweet.
No, it's good, Dave. I think, you mentioned the, serving on the committees and the work groups, for the early days, the bulk of the work from Promo Standards is being done by the board. And we've since built out this very volunteer intense committee community where, Amy and I serve on the MMEC with, Becky and JGR and some others. And your committee, obviously the standards committee is doing a lot of the technical work. There's, the service or the strategic roadmap committee and nomination. So we've built out a volunteer network where I think the real work now, I guess the heavy lift of Promo Standards is done there. And then the, getting into the weeds now is done by those work groups, right? So if you're looking for a short project, get some good experience under your belt, meet a lot of new people, those work groups are where it's at. And those work groups are kind of spun up and managed by the committee leaders. So, as we post this, Dave had some great slides at the beginning, kind of outlining who's running the committees. We have a great volunteer network. So, we're always looking for, building that pipeline. I know Amy's committee just added a few new members because we had some serious holes that, you know, I think we now plugged. So kudos there. Amy, you got anything to add before we open up for more questions?
Love this. Thanks for plugging the committees. And thankful for all our volunteers across the whole organization. You know, we couldn't do half of what we do without you all. And so if you are interested, and I think it's next month's education session will be more of a deeper dive into all the committees and the work groups that are currently happening right now for you to get involved if you would like. Happy to talk about it Tuesday because I will also be at the happy hour networking group, open bar.
Yeah.
And so happy to talk about anything PromoStandards with you all there too.
Yeah, we hope to have 40 plus technologists in Chicago. So if you want to come meet people, send people from your organization, you know, I would say we have 6 or 7 board companies already there. There's, you know, like I said earlier, 20 to 25 companies already registered. So that's going to be awesome. If you have education ideas, Becky and I kind of do a lot of the education work group stuff. Always hit Becky Ellis from San Mar or myself up. We're always looking to hammer through the next good education topic. Stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of announcements from PromoStandards coming in the next 3 weeks. Right, there's going to be launch of hackathon, initial launch of Tech Summit. There's going to be obviously our happy hour. I'm running an education event with ASI CTO on the show floor at ASI Chicago. So there's just a lot brewing. So check your PromoStandards emails. Don't ignore those things. When Jessica emails you, stay active in the general channel of Slack. There's going to be a lot. It's going to be your main hub for getting involved in the community. So let's pause here. We have a question.
Another question from Bradley.
Dave, this is you. Oh, yes. Okay. And implementation contact. We actually added in the member directory of PromoStandards.org. We went through, Jessica tediously went through every organization she could and tagged a technical contact. So if you use I think you have to log in first on PromoStandards.org. Once you log in, the member directory appears in the menu. But within that, one of the tools is at every company, one person is tagged as the technical contact. So we can at least provide that with members. And that's part of the member benefit side of it. Is we're trying to make that matchmaking process as easy as possible. And if you don't know, and if you can't find that contact, you can always reach out to Jessica. She's admin at PromoStandards. She's in Slack as admin. If she can always at least point you in the right direction or make that match for you. So don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah, that's something we run into a lot internally. Just speaking from the commonsku standpoint, you know, we have an internal directory for our distributors to find that contact, you know, if they reach out and something doesn't work quite right. But we know this industry well enough to know that those change often too. So, and for some of them, it's like, you know, IT@suchandsuch.com. It's not a human name. So that's great to know that the website has it up.
Part of that is driven by the bundle administrator, keeping that information fresh within the bundle in the directory. So like I said, you can try there. If you're still running trouble, like John said, you can reach out to Slack. Jessica in Slack. I would say Slack is kind of the freshest because people update their own information. So whether they're shifting roles or shifting companies, tendency to stay in Slack is strong while they're still reconfiguring all their new contact information. So definitely encourage you to become a member, join our Slack community, and bundle administrators, please keep your bundles updated and clean. Thanks.
To that point, Amy's point though, you can go into Slack and do it in the top search, the global search. You can just type in, like I just typed in Facilities Group and hit the People tab, and it lists everybody in, you know, that we have in our directory in Slack of that group. I think that's always a good way to go about it. So, but yeah, like I said, we're trying to, this type of feedback is great because it allows us to make sure that we're building out the community connection contacts. So. Yeah, that's good. I guess we'll
You,
give.
by the way,
yeah.
before I forget, did you say you were doing a promo standards related education session in Chicago too?
Yes, on the
Happy to-
show floor Wednesday at I think 2:00, 2:30. It's on the schedule. Kevin Zhang and I he's the CTO at ASI. We're gonna do a power of promo standards. It's more, I guess, we're gonna give more of a businessy flair to the average trade show attendee. We really just want to hammer home some business use case studies, trying to explain to, I guess, the average industry salesperson what PromoStandards is doing behind the scenes to their workflow and to their automation of order processing that they might not even know. So trying to bring some light to that. So that's the goal. All right. Anything else? All right, I just want to thank Dave. It's always like pulling teeth to get people to do education, but Dave, I think knocked out of the park this time. It's great to see that there's a lot happening on the service provider side of the organization and the industry, and I think I have a lot of hope that there's that PromoStandards reaching the edges of the industry is going to come from the service provider community. So I think the organization is real behind it and kind of looking forward to furthering our reach in the industry. So
Yeah, for sure.
thanks, Shultz.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks to my committee for all their work on this stuff.
Good times. All right, everybody. Thank you. Third Tuesday every month, 2:00. Be there.
All right. We'll see you all next week.
Ayo.